the listeners, jumping back into the interview, where we left off, we were talking about your band Medusa having interest from Virgin Records, and I believe you recorded a few demos with them.
We didn't actually. No, we recorded demos anyway because that's part of the due process, I guess.
Okay.
And we had one from rehearsal and one from a studio. A studio run by the now editor of Sound on Sound. I don't know if you get that in the States. I'm sure you do, but Paul White and basically. Clash of the Titans, that all came out with those demos because we didn't actually for real record anything for an album or that such. So yeah, that is like a practice and a short demo, that album.
Yeah, and that Clash of the Titans, it was released by Majestic Rock, the label, in 2005. Just for the listeners, if they want to check that out. And you also, briefly, before your work with Grim Reaper, you also sang on the album Chained and Desperate by Chateau.
I did. That was basically, months before, they asked me if I would do a single for them, which I duly did. And then in between that and recording that album, Grim Reaper had entered and won a local Battle of the Bands, which gave us 24 hours in a 24-track studio. So obviously we demoed that. But then I got asked by Chateau, because they hadn't found a singer at that particular point, would I go in and do the album for them? I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because then it was experience for me, because I very rarely worked in a 24-track studio. So I went and did that, but at the same time I took the demo that we'd come up with for Grim Reaper, with hindsight of, well, not hindsight, but asking the guy, would you be interested in this? And then 6 weeks later, we'd signed a deal with Ebony Records. So it was all wheels within wheels kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that you mentioned that Battle of the Bands, where you were competing for the record deal with Ebony Records with Grim Reaper. That was amongst 99 bands, right?
It was, yeah. That, there was obviously several legs of that particular thing. So I think there was about half a dozen bands there on the night. And one of the judges was Roy Wood from Wizard. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yes, I'm familiar, yeah.
Yeah. And he was one of the judges. And I'll just hasten to add, I will never, ever, ever put myself through that sort of stuff again. It was the worst time, because you're sitting in, you go up and do your bit, and then you sit and listen to other bands, and you think, well, they're better on this and they're better on that, and you just wind yourself up so badly. But and then obviously we won the thing, and the house came down. It was brilliant. And then Roy Wood made his way to come and see us after we'd won and got the prize and all that sort of stuff. And he said, do you know what? You were the best band here by far. And I was like, I was taken aback by that, because, this guy was a pop rock guy, prog rock as well, I suppose. And he really liked the band. So that was like a big thumbs up to me. So it was good. Yeah, it was really cool.
And was there any maybe like bad blood or sour grapes from the bands that didn't win towards Grim Reaper?
I don't remember any. That was a long time ago, but I don't remember any. No, I don't. I don't think there was, to be perfectly honest with you. We didn't really see. I think a couple of the bands came and congratulated us, but they I think everybody went their separate ways pretty much after that.
Mm-hmm.
But us and our fans stayed there for quite some time drinking the local ale.
in celebration, as they should.
Oh, of course, yes.
So talking about the early days of Grim Reaper, you actually replaced Paul DiMarcato in 1982,
Yes.
right? Who had performed on some of their demos. I mean, this may sound like a kind of a silly question. Is it just coincidence that your name is Grimmett and you joined Grim Reaper?
No, not at all. My name has got nothing to do with it. The Grim Reaper is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelations of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And, we've had all sorts of shit about that. We're devil worshippers and all this. And it's just like, what it is, the Grim Reaper, it conjures up great ideas for album sleeves and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
And that was it, And then the songs are like 3.5, 4 minute Hammer House of Horrors, basically stories, And we came in for a lot of crap with that, but it blew us away because we'd never even considered all that stuff. Never ever considered it. We weren't devil worshippers, and it was just like, I just don't get it, and we'd have interviews like we're doing now, and people would say, and the reporters would say, well, you've got to be devil worshippers. What about See You in Hell? And I'm like, okay, do you actually know what the song is about? And they go, no. So you haven't read the lyrics? Well, no. And I said, well, I'll tell you now. It's about the temptation of Christ. How about that? And they go, what? It's just like, yeah, well, there you go. You haven't. And one guy said to me, said same thing. Well, what about Dead on Arrival? I said, well, now you've gone too far, to be quite honest. I said, the guy that is in this story is a personal family friend who died, hit a car crossed the central reservation. But in the UK, we have like armour guard for the central reservation, stop that happening, stop a car crossing onto the other side of the freeway. But this didn't hit it, and it took off, and it went straight into his Porsche, right into the cockpit. Ooh. So, he was killed instantly, probably mangled to shreds, and that song is about him. And I said, I don't know where you're getting this from. What are you trying to pin on us that we're devil worshippers, or and I tell you, that's been a struggle for a long, long time, and it still goes on a tad, but not too much, to be fair. So it's and it comes as a nice little put you down type thing, when you tell them exactly what the lyrics are and go away and read them, before you open your mouth, sort of thing. So yeah, I've had a few interviews like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking right now about the mid 80s. This was the period a lot of people referred to as the Satanic Panic period, where a lot of journalists, you even had like Geraldo Rivera and Oprah Winfrey kind of sensationalizing heavy metal. There was the infamous case where the 2 teenagers attempted to suicide, and the one was successful at suicide, and Judas Priest was brought into court in the United States of America. There's a lot of famous cases like that. And did Grim Reaper ever have any kind of backlash like that, or was there an instance of a fan that maybe had issues and took something too far and blamed Grim Reaper or anything like that?
No. But I do, because I've got a lot of Facebook friends, and one of them said she is a Christian, goes to church every Sunday and all that, and she said that her one time the preacher was going to take us to court for it, and but it didn't happen. I think it didn't happen because everybody that tried that failed. Obviously the Judas Priest, and then Ozzy Osbourne was another. And I think basically they just thought, well, it's a waste of time. What have we done? There's nothing satanic about it at all. But anyway, they didn't. But yeah, it was kind of upsetting when you consider that it's just entertainment. You know, I don't know. I mean, we never had that problem in this country, mind you. Having said that, we've not really played a lot in the UK then and now. To be fair, we had a concert cancelled on Friday because they'd only done 6 pre-sale tickets. I mean, I did find out that there would have been about 350, 400 people there, but it's too late once you've cancelled it, you know. But that's unfortunately what happens these days. If you get no pre-sales, you can't really work out what walk-up you're going to get, so they'd rather cancel it and not pay you any money. You know? So
that's a shame. And I'd imagine that a lot of Grim Reaper spans multiple generations of metalheads. So there's probably people there that aren't used to the pre-sale culture that exists now, and are just used to going to a metal show. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's how it was in the 80s. You just rolled up, you know. You didn't. Well, there wasn't the internet in the 80s, so you couldn't do that. You'd have to go to a music shop to buy that, you know, your tickets and stuff. A lot of people didn't bother because they just rolled up on the night, and you know, and it was always a good night in the 80s. It seems like people had nothing else to do, or better to do than to get out and see a great concert. Well, now you've got TV. Well, you had TV then, but much better TV. You've got
everything's on demand.
Game consoles, phones, and the whole situation has changed. It's even the same in the pubs here. You know, in the 80s, you'd go out every night to a pub and have a few pints and then go home. Now you don't see. I've got a pub literally 200 yards away from my house, and I can go in there on a Saturday night and it's empty. And it's like, you know, and it's all to do, I think, with obviously money. That's the first one, but the second is the drink driving rules. You know, people don't want to go out; they'd rather drink at home and watch TV. You know, and I think that's all part and parcel of it.
Yeah, a big cultural shift. And
yes.
You also touched on the changes in technology, maybe steering the conversation back to the early years of Grim Reaper. Could you explain, because we have a lot of younger listeners who maybe don't even realize the significance of winning that recording deal, because with the Battle of the Bands, what you actually won was several hours in a multi-track recording studio, right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you could explain the significance of that and what it meant to your band at that point in time with the limitations of recording.
Well, I mean, we were lucky, really, because in the days of I'm going to take this back a tad. In the days of the Beatles, they had a 4-track. A lot of what you hear these days as Beatles tracks were recorded on 4 tracks. So... And then what they would do, they would keep one track spare, and then they would bounce all 3 of those tracks onto that spare track, which then gave you an extra 3 tracks to record stuff again. And you would just keep bouncing and bouncing, mixing and bouncing and doing that. Then all of a sudden, you had the invention of 2-inch multi-track, 24-track. That was just like a godsend. And that's what we won, because we'd only up to that point done stuff on 4-track machines, so it was difficult. And then once we got into this studio, it was like, wow, you know, this is incredible. You know, so each drum, each cymbal had its own channel. You know, the bass had its own channel. The guitars, which we used to double up, had each channel. Vocals, backing vocals. It was just like, it was almost limitless. But obviously not, because you only had 24 tracks. But, you know, it was an absolute pleasure to be able to work like that, because you didn't have the restraints of 4-track or 16-track machines. So, it was something else, actually. And we were, well, when was that? That would have been just very, very early 80s, maybe late 70s, that we did that. So, and that was all brand new technology. So, you know, but now obviously with digital and you're using computers, you've got a limitless amount of tracks. But it's certainly different to how it was.
Yeah, and that you described that 4-track recording process that the Beatles used. That I would add that that's actually a process that a lot of our listeners' favorite, like classic demos, extreme death metal and black metal recordings were done with that method on like Tascam and Fostex home studios in the 80s and 90s.
That's correct. Yeah.
I had one myself many years ago.
Yeah, me too.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was but very frustrating because she used to lose stuff and ruin it and all the rest of it. It was a pain in the backside, but at the end of the day, that's what we all got brought up on, And
it must suck to lose stuff. I don't know what that's like. Oh boy! Come on.
Yeah, you'll lose it in the bounce, or and it was like. Oh, now I've got to re-record everything again. It was just a nightmare. But yeah. So but it was good. It was a learning curve, and it's been part of the learning curve. And I'm still doing it. I'm still doing the learning curve bit with the new digital stuff. Because it's just phenomenal what you can do these days with the computer. It's out of this world, really.
Absolutely. And just before we get back to our conventional interview, you brought up the Beatles. I got to ask you something that is a little left field and crazy. What do you make of, or have you ever heard of this conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney died and was replaced in the late 60s?
Yeah. I don't know what to think of that. Who knows? Who knows? I haven't got a clue. To be quite honest, I don't really care because the music was fantastic, and that's it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So,
they say that they were the original boy band, so who knows what kind of maneuvering went on, right? Who knows?
Well, absolutely. You're right. Yeah, because that's how Ringo, the drummer, got put in there, because Pete Best wasn't the chick magnet,
Mm-hmm.
So but Ringo was, so it was going on then, and it doesn't go on so much now, but it certainly happened to us as well, where the record company get involved because they think they know best.
Yeah, and I do have a few questions pertaining to that type of situation. But before we jump ahead too far to other projects and bands you've been involved with, we're kind of still at the beginning of Grim Reaper, and you guys put out the "See You in Hell" music video, right? With the first album. I mean, there's a lot of our listeners might be familiar with the band through that video, and obviously people, it was famously parodied or satired on the Beavis and Butthead cartoon show. And what was your initial reaction when they were shooting the video? Take us through the steps of maybe the filming of the music video and how much creative control you guys had in it.
Well, it was a fairly basic video to be done. It was just us on a stage playing live. To no audience, but it was good fun. We'd never done it before, and it was something that we quite fancied doing. RCA at the time were requesting this because we didn't get one with our label. RCA actually paid for that, but it was something else actually, because I think the director was the same guy that did. Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen, mm-hmm. And that was a good day. Actually, it was a long day, but it was a good day. It wasn't terribly taxing because, like I say, they were just videoing us doing what we did, doing a gig.
Yeah,
it was just all day instead of a couple of hours.
And did this music video receive rotation on MTV at that point in time?
Yes, it certainly did. They put it out. They put it on MTV. They were only going to show it once. And they put a questionnaire. MTV put a questionnaire after it. Is this sort of stuff that you want to see more of? And they got inundated, absolutely inundated, where MTV then had to make a decision. Right, okay, how many more times do we do it? And what they did, they gave us maximum rotation. So it was 7 7 shows a day or 7 videos a day, 7 days a week for 7 weeks. You couldn't ask for better publicity than that. So
yeah. I mean, 6 a day for 6 days for that would have been way more metal for the 3 6s, but you'll take the extra one, yeah.
But yeah, it was a surprise to us, and a surprise to everybody really that we got so much attention from that. And going back to media, that's all we had in the 80s was MTV and the magazines. That's all we had to get the stuff out there, to announce tours and all the rest of it. That's all we had. Nothing else. It was. I'm just wondering how it would be going back if we had the media we've got now. How things would have changed, But it's not to be. It was certainly that's how we got everything out, the record. And it was the record label as well. It was all down to the label, not us at all. We didn't have anything to do with that. But now it's totally changed. It's some label, and most of it's all down to us.
Yeah, and that speaks to something else that we had touched on last time we spoke. How in the early 80s and through the 80s into the early 90s, really, heavy metal was such a huge commercial market, and all these big labels were investing so much into it. Whereas now, I'm 37, and a lot of people younger than me and from my generation think of heavy metal as being more of a clandestine, kind of cryptic, underground kind of community and culture. But maybe you could talk about just how big heavy metal was.
Well, it was huge. It was absolutely massive. Because there was no internet, people wanted to find out about you had to search magazines, watch MTV, watch other shows on TV, like Beavis and Butthead, and that's how they found out about you. That's the in-depth interviews and stuff like that, and to where you were playing, because once you announced a tour, the record label would then put that in all the magazines, so they had to buy magazines to find out what was going on, and I know that to be a fact because here in the UK we still do have Kerrang, and when that first started, I think it was close to 300,000 in the UK alone, 300,000 copies sent all over the country. So it was a well-read magazine. And these days, I think it's down to about 20,000. So that gives you some idea of how important magazines were back in the day. But now, obviously, they don't need that sort of, do we need it? No, I don't think we do. The media is different now. We use the internet, Facebook and all that sort of stuff to let the fans know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. And what about, just on that note, I know when I was getting into heavy metal in the 90s, there was there was a vibrant culture of underground zines, handmade magazines, and tape trading. Were you ever involved in that, or was that ever a big deal for Grim Reaper in the 80s?
Yeah, we did do that. We did. We never refused an interview, so we did all the fanzines and all that sort of stuff. I even did one 3-hour marathon with Cornerstone, because they got onto me and said, "Well, you're a devil worshippers band," and it took me nearly 3 hours to convince them we weren't. But yeah, it was different culture, different media scene, but there was the information out there for you to get, because, like I say, we never ever refused an interview.
Yeah, and I know you've said a few times that you've toured more extensively in the United States than in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the first time you made it over to the United States and what the reception was? And was that your first time visiting the United States? Was traveling here with Grim Reaper?
Yes, it was. Yeah. And in one word, it was debauchery. Yeah, it was. It was.
We don't censor the podcast, so feel free.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it really was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. If and that was it. We had. I think Nick and I came over about a week before the tour started, and we got onto a 747 jumbo jet. And it was like, what the hell is going on here, And, of course, we breezed it, went out, had a great time, and then did the tour. And it was just something else. It was like doing what I want to do every night of the week. It was just fantastic. It wasn't all sex, drugs, and rock and roll to start off with. The first two tours, I think, were fairly. They were insane, but not. It wasn't. We could have got locked up and all that sort of stuff. The third one was, but yeah, it was. There are lots of little things that come back to me every so often, and it's. I think about it with a lot of pleasure because it was great.
What's one of the big differences you noticed, or some of the differences you noticed between the United Kingdom and the United States? Maybe not even in terms of the heavy metal scene, or maybe in terms of the heavy metal scene, but just like kind of cultural differences and things you hadn't realized or thought of before.
We won't get upset if you say anything.
No.
July 4th is past.
I wouldn't do that anyway. And to be fair, I haven't. I dare say I've come across arseholes out there, but I've come across the arseholes here.
Yeah, we can confirm. We have a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get that in life. That's what happens. But. I loved being out there. I loved making new friends and all that sort of stuff. Some still come back to the shows we do out there now. Like all of the concrete management people. I see them on Facebook a lot. And then when we tour out in the States, if we're close to them, they'll come out and see us. And it's great. That's fantastic. But not only that, some of the fans do as well. I even had. It was I think he was 14 when we did the second Grim Reaper video. We had this kid break some chains. They were all made out of plasticine and stuff, and he broke these chains. He had to come over with one of the record labels because he was too young. He got in touch with me a couple of years back, said, "Oh, do you remember me? I was in this video." And I was like, "Wow, well, it's
awesome.
Great."
Yeah,
and that happens on a weekly basis, So we made a lot of friends, and every time we come over there, we make more. We love coming and playing in the States. We got no issues with it. Some club owners think they own much more than the club, but
tell me about it.
That's not too many,
Yeah.
I think we came across one the last tour we did, and he started ordering us around, and I said, "Excuse me, I have to take you to one side since this ain't happening tonight. You can stick it." So because I'm not putting up with your shit, and he soon. I don't think he liked me at the end of the day, but he just shut up because he wanted us to play.
Yeah. Well, it's not always about making friends, unfortunately.
No, not at all. I'd rather make friends, but
of course.
Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm.
So talking about Grim Reaper, moving on. The Fear No Evil album is recorded, I assume, in '84, and that's put out in '85, right?
Yep.
And on that album, I just wanted to note, Lee Harris had left the band, who was the drummer on See You in Hell, and was replaced by Mark Simon for the new album, for Fear No Evil. I just wanted to note that quickly, because when you listen to the two albums and the two drumming styles, all due respect to Lee Harris, but he sounds like more of your conventional rock and roll, hard rock drummer, whereas Mark Simon seemed a little bit more updated and like modernized to the time and to what was like your competitive metal music at that time, with like the double bass and things like that. Is that all fair to say?
Yes. Yes, it is. And to be perfectly honest with you, that was a record company intervention. Mm-hmm. They saw stuff that we didn't. They heard stuff that we didn't. And it was like, that was the worst day when we had to let Lee go that I've ever had in a band. It was fucking awful. It really was. And then I hadn't seen Lee for 15 years with the advent of Facebook. There you go. And now we're in regular contact, as we are Dave Waglin, the original bass player. Dave was here last Monday at my place catching up and stuff. And I've got a big birthday bash coming up in August as well. And Lee and Dave are coming to that. So that's really cool. It's a nice thing, you know, that we've stayed in touch all the time, even though you've had problems and all the rest of it. You know, I've stayed friends with them, because why wouldn't you? You know, they were great.
Yeah, friends are important.
Great guy.
Absolutely, and that's great to hear. I mean, that kind of speaks to what we were talking about a little bit before, about what a big commercial machine heavy metal was, and how the record labels were so much more involved in creative control and decisions that the bands might have more control over in this era.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. And with this era, the record labels are not as strong. Bands are not as dumb either. You know, they know that they're on a limited access type of thing with these labels now, and so nobody's going to mess with each other. You know, from the point of legalities. You know, you used to sign a contract with a label; it was 30 to 40 pages long. Now it's like 3 pages if you're lucky. You know? So there's a whole big difference, you know, because bands taking labels to court and stuff. Just you don't need that aggro. So that's why it's all done. It's very simple. It's laid out in English instead of wherefores and all that sort of stuff, you know. And I've got a really good friend that's a lawyer, and he said, all this stuff, this, therefore, and what for, and all the rest of it. He said, all that does is like loop the whole question back around again, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay. So this doesn't need to be no. This doesn't need no. So. You know, that's why, you know, contracts are a lot smaller these days, you know, because there's no need for any of that rubbish. Mm-hmm. So that's another good thing, and saves paper, of course.
I think fans, maybe metal fans and the metal culture has become a little bit more discerning. Like I feel like heavy metal fans can tell when an artist is disingenuous nowadays and maybe doing something just for commercial value as opposed to, you know, truly inspired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Yes.
So Fear No Evil comes out. I want to talk about the Fear No Evil music video. That's probably my favorite of your music videos. Really over the top, kind of post-apocalyptic Mad Max.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
vision.
That's exactly what they went for. Yeah. Fortunately, we didn't have anything to do with that. We just turned up on site, which was the water scenes with the big amphibious truck. That was done at a place called Thorpe Park, and that now is one of the biggest fun parks in the country. It was freezing cold. I think it was done in sort of like November time. We were in aircraft hangars. They got some aircraft hangars with World War I aircraft, biplanes and all that. And we were stripped down to our underpants. And then they were using paint rollers to put mud on us and all that sort of stuff to make us up, to look like, you know, we'd not had a bath or a shower in months, and all in the freezing cold. And that sticks out to me more than anything. But yeah, and then they tanked us around in this amphibious vehicle all over the lakes that are there, and shot all that stuff. And then the following day, we went to the indoor shots, which was I don't know how old the thing was, but it was a few 100-year-old barn. And I mean, that was a bone of contention to start off with, because they had to insure it for £1 million with all the... and going back in the 80s, that was a lot of money.
That's crazy.
So, yeah. So that all that was done, and you know there was a lot of money spent on that one. To be fair,
wow.
Because we had extras in, obviously, and then the wolf. He was a bodybuilder. Had him in, and that was a good couple of days actually. That was good, a lot of fun.
Amazing video, real heavy metal, like a true metal video. I mean, you guys come in, you free the metalheads, you fight the bad guy off with a guitar solo. The whole thing. Were the extras actual like metalhead kids from the area, or just like your average extras?
I think they were just average extras. I think some of them were musical, but not heavy metal. I don't think many of them were into heavy metal. They were just directed on what to do, you know. But it was good fun. That was definitely.
So, with the Fear No Evil album, I assume you guys go on a touring cycle again. What's different this time? Is it elevated status, bigger shows, new countries?
Yep, they were. Well, actually, at that time, we and up to the time when the band broke up, we had only toured in the States. We hadn't played anywhere else in the world at all.
Wow.
So yes, in the States it was from clubs to then theatres and all that sort of stuff. That sort of size place. So it was a lot bigger. We did the Hell on Wheels tour for that album, and that was with Halloween and Armored Saint. And I'm still good friends with Armored Saint. It's funny actually. I was in Brazil a couple of years ago, and they were touring, and I met up with them at the show that we did the show they did in Sao Paulo. Still the same old nice guys. It was cool. But yeah, so that's what we did with that, and that was an insane tour as well. 3 heavy metal bands and all the chicks under the sun. It was that was definitely debauchery, but yeah, it was good. It was really good fun. It's always been good fun. There's never a time where you're just ball aching to get home. So yeah, it was always good.
Okay, and going further, you guys do Rock You to Hell. Was there any trouble with the label going into that album, or does it start more after that?
It was actually, because we recorded the album with Ebony to start off with, and he'd built a brand new studio that he built with our money, which we didn't realise at that time. And then we found out, and it was like, right, okay, you got to put this right. You owe us money. Anyway, he took us to court or filed a lawsuit against us. RCA didn't want to know and dropped us because of that. And he tied us up from working for quite some time as well through this. In fact, that was the demise of Grim Reaper, because we couldn't work anymore. He put a cease and desist, whatever you might call it. I don't know what it was called, but he did that to us and stopped us from working. Nice, eh?
Yeah,
wow,
what an asshole!
So
it's like awful.
So 3 albums in, popular band. You guys had. I remember watching a very a live performance on Headbangers Ball MTV. You guys are a popular band with a following that you've built over 3 albums and, several years of the 80s. And just this guy files this stop work, and that's it? There's nothing you guys can do?
Yep. Nope. Absolutely nothing. And it took, well, because we didn't have any money and all the rest of it, and I still haven't been paid anything by RCA at all. Right, I'm fighting that with them at the moment with lawyers.
Wow.
So we had no money, so we couldn't fight it. And then I mentioned earlier, I got a friend that's a lawyer. He sorted all that out for me, and basically got me out of this lawsuit, which wasn't ever going to be continued because Ebony Records went bust, and so that wasn't going to happen either. But it had to be resolved, so it was resolved, and then I started on other projects after that. So it was a shit time. And that's just one of the things that the music industry can do to you. Unfortunately, we'd had it done to us.
Yeah, sad to hear that and to know that. But I do have to say, you really didn't let it bring you down. You didn't waste any time at all because you. Is that on your end?
That? That's the ice cream man.
Oh,
oh, great!
And my dog is an Alaskan Malamute, and when he comes round, she starts howling.
I don't blame her.
That's adorable.
Sorry about that.
All good.
We have ice cream trucks and dogs right here in the States too, so we totally understand. I'm very paranoid about audio problems, as you can understand. So, as I was saying, you don't really waste any time because you pop up as early as 1988 on the Shell Shock EP, singing for the English band Onslaught.
That's right. Yeah, they were with London Records, which is part of Polygram, and they'd done their album with Stefan Galfus, and the label rejected it because they were going to go into it. They were going into a different style, and Cy Keeler, unfortunately, just couldn't do he couldn't do the job. And I feel so. I like Cy. I'm friends with Cy, but. He got kicked out of the band by the band and the record label, and obviously they'd been watching. Onslaught's management had been watching what was going on with me, and then I got a phone call out of the blue. Can you, would you be interested in singing for us? And it was for a wage and all the rest of it. So I was like, yeah, I'm interested. And then they sent me some of the songs without the vocals on, and I went into my garage and recorded my vocals, my version of the vocals, onto a 4-track machine.
Nice.
So that was my interview.
Great.
So I did that, and they loved it. And then I think within 2 or 3 weeks, I was in the States with Stefan Galfus in Atlantic Studios, re-recorded the album.
Mm-hmm. You put. I just wanted briefly for the listeners pause to say this is generally speaking more of an extreme metal, death metal, thrash metal, black metal oriented podcast. And I think the listeners, obviously a lot of people know Grim Reaper, but if you're not familiar with Onslaught, you might want to check out this In Search of Sanity album that Steve did with Onslaught in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, or 89 actually.
It's 89. Yeah.
Really, really good thrash metal. Really good extreme thrash metal, and maybe just more of a crunchy, less melodic presentation for your vocals than Grim Reaper was. It's a different vibe,
Yes, it definitely is. Yeah, it's more on that because what they were doing before was definitely death metal, and they upped their game because they wanted a bit of the Metallica type stuff, and so did the label, to be fair. Mm-hmm. And and that's what we did, and it's still to this day their best selling album. So that tells you something, but it didn't, and it wasn't ever going to last very long because there was just too much going on internally with the band and the label, and there's a 14-minute ballad type thing on the album, Welcome to Dying. By far the band's most popular song. The label wanted to put it out as a single. Even my local radio station, who had an hour slot, was going to play it, but he got inundated by fans to say, we want it all, the whole show. So he was going to play it 4 times on his show with no other music. Yeah.
Wow.
So that tells you how popular it could be. The band, London Records had come up with a bunch of caricatures of the band, which were great. Wanted to use that on the sleeve. Now, bearing in mind, it wasn't the album sleeve. This was just the sleeve for the single. Band didn't want to do it. And I was just like, look, guys, you've got to do this. They will get so far behind this single. I'm looking at a number 1 because it was just after Christmas. And if you release an album and do around 40,000 copies, it'll go to number 1 without any shadow of a doubt. But no, they decided, no, we're not doing that. And the record company lost interest, and we did, I think, 1,500 copies. So, that was the end of my stint with Onslaught, because I thought that was just ridiculous. When you've got a label that wants to pile money into you to make you the next Metallica, maybe it would have worked, I don't know. But
at least it's a try.
You go with it. Yeah. You go with it, Yeah. And you take it with both hands, and you grab hold of it, and you nurture it. But no, and that was it. Then that was the last thing they ever did. I left, and they were going to do another tour. Another singer stepped in, and the label let them go very shortly after that. So it just shows you, if you don't, if you're not prepared to ebb and flow with stuff, you'll end up in the shit at the end of the day, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, sometimes you have to be able to navigate, these type of situations.
Absolutely. Yeah, if my label said, "Well, look, can you do a cover version of so and so?" and I'm like, "What do you want to do with it?" Well, we it will project the band in a better way. I'll do it. I'm not, and to be fair, it's not these days where you'll be earning millions from that, because that ain't going to happen at all. So it's just an aid to help the label. If they ask you for it, it's for a specific reason. And I did think that Onslaught made a few bad choices in that respect.
Well, at least we have that album. And also, just skipping ahead, there's another highly recommended album for our listeners, which is the album Evil Beyond Belief, recorded by the Sanity Days.
Yes.
It came out in 2015, and that's actually a band that features you, Steve Grice, who was the longtime drummer of Onslaught, and several, Jace Stallard and Alan Jordan, who are also ex-Onslaught members from different eras of the band. And you guys came together and, under the name The Sanity Days, recorded the Evil Beyond Belief album, which is, again, a really highly recommended, I guess you could say thrash if we're going to box it in, but I feel like it's influenced almost by your more modern extreme death and black metal at times.
I think so. I think I think you're right. That sounds like a really good description. And it was a fantastic. I really enjoyed doing that with the guys as well, although I was busy doing the last Reaper album as well at the same time. So it was a bit manic, but it was well received. It didn't sell as many as we thought it was going to do, because Al Jordan, the guitarist, he contracted cancer of the bladder, and it knocked him for 6. And I don't think he's picked up a guitar since then either. So that was a long time ago. I have spoken to Al on numerous occasions, and he's like, "No, I still haven't picked one up. And it's a shame, that is, because I think that would have done a decent amount of stuff too.
Well, one thing it did do is was it the 7,000 Tons of Metal cruise? Is that the cruise? It was one of those cruises that you performed at, right, with that band?
That's no. We did that. I did that with Grim Reaper, the 70,000 Tons of Metal tour cruise.
Okay, but if I'm not mistaken, isn't there a story where you were booked on the same bill as the current Onslaught lineup, and there was some sort of exchange?
No. Not at all. They were on the 70,000 Tons of Metal tour.
Yes.
But they were definitely on that. But no. They called me, actually. Well, no, they messaged me to start off with. Jeff, the bass player, did, to say, look, we're playing on the same boat. Would you come up and do some songs for us? And I was just like, okay, you're going to have it both barrels. With all the shit that I had to put up with, from you mouthing off about the fact that you didn't like the Sanity Days doing the old In Search of Sanity album, and the public rubbish that you said and put us through, no way would I ever, play with you again at all. I don't want to. And I saw, and not only that, how would you feel if like, this singer that came along and took your job in the first place to do this In Search of Sanity albums, come on stage and did the same thing? I'm like, what are you like? Anyway, no, we didn't. There was no exchange. That was it, in its entirety. I still spoke to Si on the boat, and Jeff as well. To be fair, I didn't leave it in a way that it created enemies, because what's the point? Life's too short. But it was just like, no, I'm not going to do that for you, not at all. And but we. Grim Reaper played it, and we had really fantastic shows, 2 shows, and they were brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic. So there was one, I think it was about 2,500 seats in this one. I want to say arena. It's not an arena. It's a theatre, and we filled it up the first time we played there, and then the second one was a lot smaller, but we packed that place out as well, and we had a fantastic time. It was really nice.
Excellent. Yeah, I didn't mean to misrepresent that. I knew there was.
No, that's okay. No, it's okay, because sometimes things get bent out of shape, and and there's no need to bend that one out of shape, because it was just like the honest, I've just given you an honest answer, and if you ask Jeff at some point, the bass player, he'll tell you the same thing. That's exactly what I said, and so I didn't play with them.
Okay, fair enough, understandable. And going back into your history a little bit, after that. After you leave Onslaught, or the Onslaught situation happens, and you're no longer with Onslaught, it seems like very quickly you form Lionsheart. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. Well, I actually started speaking to the bass player and guitarist. They're identical twins. I started speaking to them whilst I was still in Onslaught, and said, you obviously want to do some stuff with me. This is what I'd like to do. I'd like to make it. I wanted to do British blues bass rock, a bit like Whitesnake.
Yes.
And so that's what we did. But it was after I left them, after I left Onslaught, that I got in touch and said, right, okay, I'm free now, let's do it. So we did that, and we did the album, and I took it to London Records because I was still signed to them at the time, and they said no. So we took it. Who picked it up? It was Music for Nations in the UK. It was quite a large independent then, and they picked it up and stuck with me for another couple of 2 albums actually. So I did 3 albums under Music for Nations with Lionsheart. It was good.
You have the self-titled album in '92, 94 Pride Intact, and in '98 the Under Fire album. And then in '04 there was kind of a comeback with Abyss.
Yes, it was. Yeah, Into the Abyss. It was, and that was with, well, the guitarist especially is the guitarist that I've got with me now for Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper, Ian Nash. We did do that album. We did that because somebody told us that the Japanese would be very, very interested in doing it. Well, in actual fact, we spent all this money because we weren't signed. We spent a lot of money making it, and apparently this company wasn't interested in the first place. So they we get stung again. But Japan is definitely on the cards for Grim Reaper. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Well, I understand that Lionsheart was very big in Japan during the 90s.
It was actually, yeah. I remember I was out there the day it was released, and Tets Maru, the A&R guy from, I can't remember the name of the label. It won't come to me. Anyway. He picked me up in a cab in the morning to go and do some interviews, and he said, Steve, if you release an album in Japan and you do 15,000 copies, it's considered a success. I was like, oh, well, that's great. It'd be great to do that amount. He said, well, we did that in the first 10 minutes this morning. I was like, what? You've got to be kidding me. He said, no, by the time we finished, this thing would have done 80, 90,000 in the first couple of days.
Wow.
And it rocketed us right to the number one spot in the Japanese charts, which is unheard of.
Wow.
for a non-Japanese band. And and then all of a sudden, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't walk out in the streets. Couldn't do anything. It was something else, actually. That was, and because we rode on the bullet train to go here, there, and everywhere to do interviews, and there would always be loads of fans and that waiting, and I did a sign-in session in a little record store in Tokyo. And it was in a small shopping mall, and I was there for 4 hours signing stuff. The whole place got taken over by Japanese fans. It was unbelievable. But it was great. That was good. Yeah, we did a subsequent tour on top of that. So it was all good.
Was that your first experience in Japan? Because you mentioned that Grim Reaper had you been to Japan with Onslaught or anything like that? Or
no, that was the first one.
Wow.
It was it was something else too. It was like all of a sudden you were elevated to where you really want to be, but as far as popularity is concerned, it was that's where you want to be, and it was fantastic. I love the Japanese people. I'm still friends with a few of those two, and I've got a contact there who wants to take us out for a few shows. So, but what I'm looking to do is to try and do Australia as well at the same time. So,
excellent. Much like we talked about with Grim Reaper coming to the United States, what was it like with Lionsheart going to Japan for the first time, and what was the metal scene and the general cultural differences like, and how did that strike you at the time?
I didn't expect what happened to us at all. And like I say, we couldn't walk out in the streets without being recognised. I mean, I remember we had to do 2 TV shows almost at the same time. So 2 guys went and did the one show, and I did another. But they dropped us off at a cab at the first one, and I had to walk on to the next one. And I was just inundated with kids, and you don't expect it. And one thing that is really eerie, and you go to the place that you're playing, and you sat in the dressing room, and bearing in mind you're on the side of the stage, and you know that the doors have been open for half an hour, and you hear nothing. They stand in total silence, And then when you're on, they go absolutely apeshit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's just like, oh, I'm going to have to work for this one tonight. But as soon as you walked on, it was just like something else. But yeah, they stand in total silence.
Reserving the energy for the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, yeah.
So in the 90s, with Lionsheart, is this like an older, wiser, more mature Steve Grimmett, or is this still sex, drugs, and rock and roll?
No, it's much more a maturer me. I know what I want, and I know not exactly how to get it, but I'm not basically doing anything for nothing anymore.
Okay.
And started to take control of what I was doing rather than being led the merry dance. So yeah, it was I always reflect on stuff that I've done there, having a good time, and even now, I'll tell you that because we did. I've never sat in my hotel room thinking I'd rather be home or I'd rather be doing this. I'm there because I really want to be, because it's good fun, and I earn a living at it. Well, now I do, but it's a great job.
Absolutely. And you've got such a wealth of material. I want to get into the 2000s a little bit and cover some of the albums you've released in the 2000s and forward. But as we said, Lionsheart was no slouch as you put out the 4 albums. And as you said, Ian Nash played guitar on it's Into the Abyss, the 2004 Lionsheart album. And Ian Nash ends up becoming your guitarist for the reformed Grim Reaper lineup in 2006, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit? I mean, well, all right. 2006, you have the reformed Grim Reaper lineup, and 2007, you release your solo album, Steve Grimmett's Personal Crisis album.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about that period of time and how you go from the Lionsheart mode into reforming Grim Reaper and then recording Personal Crisis, which Personal Crisis has some lineup members that you've used on other projects?
Yeah, it was Pete Newdeck. And was the bass player? I catch up. My mind's going. I'll tell you. It was a different bass player who then joined us. All of those guys joined us for the early Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper.
Was it Mart Trail?
Martin Trail was on the last album that we did.
Okay, or
Walking in the Shadows.
Chaz Grimwaldy, Richard Walker.
Richard Walker.
Okay,
that was the guy I was trying to think of. Yes, yeah. So that was a good lineup, great players. But that didn't last. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a band thing anyway. Because I think we did a few dates in the UK, but Richie had problems at home. He couldn't do it anymore. Pete Newdeck went his own way, and Ian and I then got. We were getting tour offers from all over the place, and one of them was South America. Chaz had joined us then, Chaz Grimaldi. He's from the US, but he was over here with his family working. And we were asked to do South America. Had no drummer at the time, so we got in a guy called Paul White, great drummer, and we did that session. He came out to the States with us as well, but eventually that melted down. Nothing too bad, but was. We got in. Ian and I got in a new rhythm section. Julian Hill on bass and Mark. I nearly said Mark Simon then. Mark Pullen on drums, who we've known for years. And just said, what do you think we could do? You can come out to the States with us, do a tour with us, and see if you like it. And if you like it, then we'll do an album and do that. So that's what we've done. We did 2 tours last year, this year, sorry. Did 2 tours, 2 small tours, and now we've got another one coming up, which starts at the end of August into the middle of September. Yes. So that'll be our last tour then on that visa.
Well, we're gonna have this episode out before then, and try to promote that on social media. And watch out, Steve. We might even come out to the New York show if you're unlucky.
Oh, right, okay, cool.
Well,
that way you can buy me a beer.
Yeah, we definitely owe you a pint or two.
Okay, yeah, cool.
But all right, so I guess it's fair to say you record this Personal Crisis, the Steve Grimmett solo album, and then because of maybe some issues with personnel not being able to commit to it, and there being a demand for Grim Reaper, that's Grim Reaper gets back out there on the road, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got we got asked to do Wacken, which is a major festival.
Yes, I always
and
wanted
the
to
guy that got us involved in that, Jez Cox, I will name names, who used to sing for Tigers of Pantang. He got us out there on the revised that it would be a Grim Reaper reunion. And I said, no, it won't be. I said, because that's just never going to happen. But and I said, look, I've got a new band that I want to get out there, and but what we will do is do a few Grim Reaper songs. And he didn't tell the organisers, so we arrived there. Everything's still Grim Reaper, and it's not Grim Reaper, you know. And so that was I think we ended up upsetting them, but it wasn't our fault, you know, the promoters and stuff, because we haven't been asked to go back there again. But that started everything off. Then Keep It True Festival got in touch with us. You know, we want to do Grim Reaper. We're not worried about reformation. Just come out and do the work. So we did that, and that was we had a fantastic show, and we've been doing stuff all over Europe since then, and we've done Keep It True twice now. So it's in Europe, it's a very healthy genre of music to be playing, you know, so it's quite good.
As I've been told, unfortunately, I live in the United States where hip hop and country music is a lot more popular, you know, but I've always heard that in Europe, metal is a lot more of a respected art form.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, it is everywhere really, apart from the UK and obviously the States. But I mean, we do okay in the States.
Yeah.
You know, we do definitely do okay. And it's not just the old boys turning up. It's a wealth of youngsters, you know, teenagers, and then 20, 30, 40, and up to our age, or up to my age, that turn up to see you. So that's really cool. And it's kind of different in South America. It's all youngsters. It's all teenagers and 20-year-olds. And I think Australia would be the same, and so would Japan. I think Japan will probably be a mixture of ages. Yeah, I'd do it anyway.
Yeah, I think metal is at a really healthy point right now worldwide.
It is. It is definitely. Yeah, definitely. And the interaction that I get a lot on the internet tells me that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys come back with Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper. You record the 2011 Alive and Kicking EP. She liked that one.
It's the wolf. Yeah.
And the 2016 Walking in the Shadows album.
Yes.
Now I don't want to overlook this one particular album that we kind of skipped, though, that comes out before that. I assume that maybe you met the gentlemen in Fargo, North Dakota, who were members of the bands Dozer and Sons of Poseidon while you were on the road with Grim Reaper in the early 2000s?
No, I wasn't. I was on holiday.
Okay.
My ex-wife was from the same area as Steve Stein. Okay. And I said, it's just such a shame that you're not doing anything, you know. And he said, well, all I do is play in Dozer, and I do, you know, I teach kids. And it was such a shame, and I'm so pleased for Steve, because he's become one of those very talked about guitar virtuosos now, and I'm very pleased about that. But yeah, I said to him, look, do you want to do an album? I said, I'd love to do one with you. So we started on that straight away, and came up with the Grimstein album, and that is part of my name, by the way. So, and obviously Steve's, and yeah, I really enjoyed doing that album. In fact, we've got another one virtually in the can. So my label is crying out to get hold of that, and I said, well, when everything else is finished, we can do that, and I'll probably get Steve to come over, and we'll just record it in my studio and get it done.
Excellent. Yeah, because I don't want to overlook or let some of your other albums and projects become overshadowed by your work in Grim Reaper in the context of this interview.
No, not at all. No, and it's a good album, and I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
Although we were sharing files across the ocean, it was, because we never actually got into the studio at all together. So that was something. Mm-hmm. But I think this time I'll have Steve over here, and we'll record stuff in my studio. Well, record the album. I'd say I think we got 9 songs done, so maybe a couple more, and we'll be. There was one thing I found it extremely easy to write with Steve, and that's why we've got another one in the can. It's been in the can for a long time, but we've got one because I found it so easy to write with him. But yeah, so that's another on the bucket list, and obviously we have another one. I think it's coming out at the end of August, in time with our tour to come out there.
Excellent. Yeah, because I just wanted to bring those albums up because it almost reminds me. There's a parallel. We interviewed on the show several weeks ago a death metal singer named Matty Way, who's very accomplished, and he sang for a lot of different projects and bands and kind of one-off album releases and studio projects over the years. And I said his approach almost seems like a vocalist who spread himself out amongst a lot of different producers and musicians. So you hear his voice in a lot of different, in the context of many different platforms. There's a parallel, I think, there to be made about you and your discography, because people can go back, like I've been saying. I've been trying to build a case for, going back and listening to Onslaught, to the Grimstein album, the Personal Crisis solo album, all of these things to like maybe build, to like enhance the Steve Grimmett experience, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I'm thinking about doing as well. Doing a tour with a completely new band, especially to do Steve Grimmett. So there'll be some Grimstein, I guess, some Reaper, and then some of my Personal Crisis and some of the Lionsheart stuff, and probably do like a world tour with that, but do it all in one hit sort of thing, so I'll be away for months, and but try and do that.
Okay, just get somebody to feed the dog, okay?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, that sounds great. And, again, like I said, I've just been trying to make the case for people to check out other projects of yours that maybe they're not as familiar with as Grim Reaper. And speaking of Grim Reaper, like we said, the 2016 Walking in the Shadows album, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, that experience going back and was it like intimidating to go back and do another Grim Reaper album, or like how did it feel?
No, it wasn't actually. No, it was good. It was Ian and I spent a fair amount of time working on what we wanted to do with this album. Was it to be another Grim Reaper album, or was it to be Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper? So we decided Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper, and it would sound like old Grim Reaper. And I think we successfully managed to do that. It went down well. I have not seen one bad review for that album, and it's all had rave reviews. So I think we did the right thing. And time has told it was very popular. So yeah, it was good. And Ian and I earned money.
That's always nice in heavy metal, but not guaranteed.
It is, yes, yeah.
And you guys toured for that album?
Yes, we did. We toured. Well, we did some touring. I'm sure we did the States. In fact, I know we did the States.
Yeah.
I had a fill-in guitarist to do that, and we did. Well, yeah. Then we did South America, and that's when I lost my leg, and so everything ground to a major halt. So that was a pain in the arse, but yeah, it was. We didn't really fully tour that album. We certainly didn't tour it in Europe, but we have done quite a number of festivals and stuff. So it has made its way out there. But yeah, that was all down to me losing my leg in South America. Is why we didn't tour the album as much as we should have done.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, and what I was building up to was that. So you put out the album "Walking in the Shadows," the big comeback Grim Reaper album, which is received well, and I think rightfully so by fans. You begin touring the United States. You move down to South America, then in Ecuador. Could you just maybe take us? I know it's been documented very well on social media, but maybe just briefly sum up what happened in Ecuador.
Well, before I left on that tour, for some time I'd had a diabetic ulcer on the bottom of my foot. By the time we went out to tour in South America, it looked like it had healed up, and the hospital were giving me the thumbs up too. But I must have done something to it. I don't know what, but the first part of the tour was in Mexico. We were there for 10 days, and obviously the water's terrible out there, and that's where I picked up the infection. Because once we'd left Mexico, we went to Quito in Ecuador, and that's when I started really getting ill, and I could hardly walk and stuff like that.
And you were doing shows like along the way the whole time while you're feeling very under the weather.
Yep. Yeah, and I didn't know. I was shivering like crazy, like really bad shivers, and now I know that's a sign of sepsis. So, obviously my body was being poisoned, and literally I was dying. Although I didn't know. And then we got to Guayaquil, and I was majorly unwell, so I got a doctor to come to the hotel. And he bandaged up my foot properly and shot me full of drugs so I could go and do the show. And basically, I got on stage, and within 4 numbers, I had to sit down and finish off the set. And then we got an encore. So I went and did the encore, which I managed to stand up on. But then one thing. I don't know if I've mentioned this yet in this interview, is the fact that wherever we play, we always look after the fans. After the show, we're going towel down, maybe change T-shirt, come out and take pictures and sign stuff with the fans. Always do that, always. And Guayaquil was no exception. But we had to, because I think they'd all stayed for that. And they kept letting them out of the auditorium into our dressing room area, and they were signing stuff, taking photographs, and the doctor he actually stayed, and he was checking his watch and everything, and I could see that out of the corner of my eye, and he was like, okay, an hour, that's enough, you're going to the hospital. So I was like, okay, I gave in, went to the hospital, and that's all when it went shit-shaped, really. I got in, and it was just something else. It looked like a demilitarized zone inside the hospital, but it was clean, So I felt confident that I was going to be looked after. Got taken up into the pensioners' ward, and that's when the doctor, she was a lady doctor to start off with, they basically cut my foot to pieces in an operation to try and get rid of the problem.
Just quickly, when you say pensioners ward, what exactly does that mean?
Because I was old.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like for elderly people or something.
Oh yeah. Although there wasn't all elderly people in there, I don't get it. But
well, it might be elderly in terms of what elderly means to that country or that area.
It may do. May do. I wasn't insulted.
No, okay. I don't know if a lot of people know that term pensioner, but go on. Not to interrupt you. So you're in the ward and they're cutting up.
Yeah, in the ward, and basically this woman doctor cut my foot to shreds, and literally to shreds, and then 5 days took all the dressings off, and I looked at my foot and I thought, do you know what? I do not want that on the end of my leg anymore. It looked horrible, and they decided then to cut me below knee. And amputate, and I got taken into the theatre and just given an epidural, so I was awake for the operation. So I didn't feel any pain, but I could hear them sawing through my bones, which I could tell you was not pleasant.
Wow.
And then 5 days after that, well, I nearly got home as well, but the airline stopped me from travelling because I'd only had the operation done a few days before, and they insist on 10 days, and that's any airline apparently. So I had to go back to the hospital.
Oh God! So you were all ready to go home, and then
I was ready to go home. Yeah, 300 fans had turned up as well to see me off, and it was like, oh no. But anyway, I started. They turned me over in the bed, and my stump hurt like hell. So they took the dressing off, and basically I'd got necrosis in the cut, which is a flesh-eating disease. And so I had another doctor then come and see me, and he said, I'm going to have to take you above knee. I was like, fine, okay, no problem. So it was a little bit of a relief, really, because my grandfather died of gangrene. He was a diabetic, and he had his toe nipped by a chiropodist, and he died of that infection.
Wow.
And when you're diabetic, you cannot have an amputation because it spreads instantly to the next bit, to the next part of your body. So that's what I was worried about. I was then thinking about, do you know what, I'm going to die. And went in again into the theatre, and they did the same thing. Give me an epidural and started sawing away. Well, the femur bone is quite big, and it's all hand saws as well. It's not bone saws. They're bone saws, but they're not electronic. They're like a push me pull you job.
Wow, goodness.
And I'm digging deep as well because it's all going on, and I'm like, shit, I've got to get through this. And they got the saw stuck in the bone twice, and it's like I say, I didn't feel it, but it's just like it's going on, and fuck, I tell you, the will it took to get through that is unbelievable. And I suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. Like the soldiers do when they come back from war, or some of them. Yeah. And I lost probably 80% of my hair. I've been a bit of a mess since, really. And that all sort of came together. I lost my brother, my best mate, in September of last year. Sorry. And that brought everything to a head. I've gone through all sorts of shit. Mentally wise, but I'm getting there. I'm getting over it all now, and it is coming together. But wow. It was. And then I had 2 operations after that. They put a drain in the cut, and they knocked me out for both of those.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean.
That's like, why have you done that? The only reason that I can see, or the only difference that I could see, was when I had the epidural, I was only in post-op for about 20 minutes. When I was knocked out, I was in there for 2 hours. So that's the only difference I can see. So I don't know. But besides, obviously, hearing your bones being sawn off, it's I'd rather have been knocked out, really. But hey ho.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well,
so it was a bit of a nasty time, really. It wasn't fantastic. And then, I spent 7 weeks in hospital after all that, and I had no entertainment at all. Nobody spoke English, broken, but not fully, and I couldn't speak Spanish. And the only thing I had was I had my phone, and I could. I had half an hour's internet a day. That's all you got on the freebie, So I spent 15 minutes every day speaking to my family in rotation, and then 15 minutes finding out what the hell I could do to get back up on stage. And, so I was looking at different stuff, different prosthetics and all that sort of stuff. And then that all changed when I got back home to England. They sent me to a proper... because we have the national health system here, and it's all done for nothing. Well, you pay into it with your wages and stuff, but they kindly gave me a leg for that with this company in Oxford. So yeah. And I'm still learning to walk. Would you believe? And it's 2.5 years now, and I suppose 2 years since I've had the leg, but I am still learning to walk. And apparently that can take up to 5 years. Because if you are a soldier that's lost legs, you get 24/7 care. Until you can do everything for yourself. You don't get that in the private sector. You get shown how to walk, and then you're released, and so it's a question of you've got to go and learn how to do it yourself. I have fallen over so many times you wouldn't believe. I've fallen over on stage. I've fallen off the stage as well. Yeah. It's all it's all coming together.
I've managed to fall off stage with 2 working legs, so don't feel bad. Jesus, yeah. I just to bring a little levity to the subject, with all due respect, I mean, I'm sorry for your troubles. What a story. Amazing to me that you're still in the hospital recovering, and you're using half of your internet time a day to research how you can get back on stage. It's not even a question of if I'm going to get back on stage. It's how.
No, it's how. How can I deal with it?
Amazing.
Because everything. As you know, everything... Actually, you probably don't, because you haven't thought about it. But every venue you play has stairs.
Yes.
And that's one thing I struggle with. I can do it, but it's one step up and up at a time and one step down at a time. I have to take them one at a time. The leg that I've got, can deal with actually walking down the stairs properly. But my brain tells me I can't do that. so it's all one at a time. But everywhere you play, and pretty much everywhere you go these days, it's all stairs. So you have to take that into consideration. But yeah, it was 6 months to the day that I got home, got my leg, and got back up on stage, and that was something else. I'll tell you, it was at the Headbangers Open Air in Germany.
Whoa!
And it was a big show. I think Vince Neil was on after us, and I got up on stage, did most of the songs, and then the stage was in two levels, and I'd stayed on the top level, and I thought, right, I'm going to go out and see the fans, because there was a big walkway out there as well, and I got my wife was with me. She helped me down the stairs, and then I walked out onto the walkway, and the fans got louder and louder and louder as they were cheering, to see me get up there and do what I was doing. That made me cry. But it made every bit of effort it took me to get up there worthwhile.
Amazing. I think metalheads and the metal culture has a lot of respect It's been said many times, I've heard, even from people in hip-hop culture and things like that heavy metal has more respect for our elders than other genres of music. And I think more so even in instances like this where you've overcome something to retain your status and to continue in heavy metal.
I mean, I can't run around stage like I used to, but I still get around the stage, because the big thing for me was shaking hands with our fans, if I can get close to them. And that was one thing that I love doing, and I still can do that. But I can't run from one side of the stage to the other. Well, not yet, anyway.
Not yet. I love the attitude, man. Great, man. So that kind of brings us up to date now. You have a tour booked, as you mentioned before, coming over in late August, early September to the States with Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, is there any new recordings? You also mentioned that there's a new Grimstein album that's close to completion. Is there anything else that we should keep an eye out for? New releases, new music?
Yes. We'll be playing new music from the album, from the Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper album. It's called At the Gates.
Amazing.
It's basically the story of me being in hospital, losing my mobility. It's not all of that, but it's some of it, about the turmoil and stuff I went through. So it's called At the Gates because I was fairly close to being at the gates, at the pearly gates. So yeah, that's what it's titled for.
Wow. And is that recorded yet?
Yes, done. It's done and dusted. In fact, the record label gets it tomorrow. So
what label is that?
It's on Dissonance again.
Okay.
Dissonance Productions. It's part of Plastic Head Distribution in the UK.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, so that's. I haven't got a release date yet, but we're hoping that we can get it out to tie in with this tour. So okay, I'm sure they can do it. They've got everything they need. There's no reason why they shouldn't. So
we'll be watching, and as I said, we're going to be promoting that tour and any other promotion or music that comes out around that time. Cool. when we try to get this interview out in a timely fashion. And speaking of time, you've already been so hospitable to us with your time, and we really appreciate your time and want to be respectful of it. So at this point, we're going to start winding the interview down.
Okay.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we usually ask all of our guests to recommend one fairly recent release and one older classic release to the listeners. If you could do that.
What, of mine or somebody else's?
Usually of somebody else's. Not necessarily even heavy metal. Just something for people to research and get into.
Okay. Last in Line, Dio, is an older release, which is fantastic. And I think, I think that's Dio in all of his guise and fantastic vocals. Still sorely miss the guy, really do.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're certainly worse off by losing him. But new release, yeah. I tell you what, check out Satan's Empire. Now, they're not a massive band, but they're bringing out one called Hail to the Empire. I'm recording it at the moment, and it's a really, really great album. So check that one out. It's not out yet, but it's one worth checking out.
Okay, and what, I mean, not to box them in, but stylistically, how would you describe them a little bit?
Heavy metal. To its absolute core.
All right.
They were in the 80s, and they are still this, to this day. And they're a great bunch of guys. They deserve a bit of a kick,
So this is a legacy band with a history.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Excellent. And just quickly, you did mention Dio. What's your opinion on the Dio hologram concerts?
Forget it. The guy's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't get the whole idea behind that. I really don't. I certainly wouldn't go and see it. maybe people do. I know, because I think it's been quite successful, hasn't it? But I just think, we should enjoy what he did for us. Not, and I don't know. I'm in two minds about it, really. But I hope they don't do it again.
Yeah, I feel very conflicted about it. I have the same kind of gut reaction of not liking it, not thinking it's respectful. But then somebody did make an argument to me in conversation that for, if you wanted to bring your kids there to show them, the legacy of Dio, like, I guess there's an argument that can be made that younger generations could benefit from it somehow, but they could, I suppose. But then there's all of his videos that they can watch, but, so I don't know. Like you say, I'm conflicted about the whole thing, really. So, yeah, me too. But I just wanted to get your opinion on that. It's a complicated issue. But Steve Grimmett, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your patience with the Heavy Hole podcast. We really appreciate it, man.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look forward to seeing Steve Grimmett's Grim Reaper in the States late August or early September. We'll get that New York date, and we'll share all the information on the social media. Cool. And Steve, just anything else you want to share with the listeners and the fans, anything you want to say in passing or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'd like to say to the fans and the people that are coming to see us and the people that have seen us, thank you for your continued support, and thank you for all the well wishes that I had, when I was in hospital and getting myself back up on 2 feet. And I'll never forget any of that. So thank you very much indeed. Love you all.
Excellent. And thank you, Steve, for your resilience in heavy metal all these years and all the strength you've shown. It's inspiring. I mean, not to sound cliche or anything like that. It is inspiring, I'm sure, to a lot of your fans and supporters to see you overcome the things you've overcome,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I get little things said to me I say things to myself, but in the words of the great Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill, never give up. And that's been it,
I think that would be a very strong note to end on, Steve. So, So all due respect to you and to all of your bandmates, and to your legacy, man. Thank you so much, and we look forward to watching you continue to forge that legacy, Steve. So we'll be in touch, and thanks again.
No problem at all, guys. Take care.
Later, brother. Steve.